Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And joining myself and Mikey McCubbin today, we have Clive Palmer, Arsenal guru. Clive, welcome to the Lowdown. You've been on a few Sky Mobile transfer shows over the summer, but I think this is your debut on the Lowdown. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. A nice calming week at Arsenal, so nothing much to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, we are going to frame this around sort of Arteta and the accusations that he is being too defensive for Arsenal to win the league title, but it's going to be more of an Arsenal general chat, 5 games in now. I mean, Clive, how do you reflect on the opening weeks of the season as a whole?
Yeah, it's been a change because we've got players now, haven't we? We've spent money, and so when you have a level of quality of players that we have, and the signings have been quite good, not just people have spent, but they're actually good players. The expectation changes, and the expectation on the manager is changing because he hasn't won the title for 3 years. Other teams want to play too, by the way. We haven't won the title for 3 years. And so the next step is obvious for everybody. So there's almost like an external pressure on success, right? And I always say this though, guys, no one wants it more than the players and the manager. And we seem to forget that, And so, but I do think with the increase in squad size, it will drive different conversations about your approach, your selections, because you have more options, So I personally wish a few more of those options were fit, because I don't think the debate would be as tough, right? So it'd be easy if Odegaard and Saka were fit. We'd be talking about different things, but it is what it is. This is where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mikey, I suppose the chat really on Sunday was how much Arsenal dominated the games in terms of possession, but maybe waited a bit too long or maybe got the selection wrong initially. There's been accusations that Arteta's been too defensive this season. Where do you fall on that? Because the underlying numbers are pretty good for Arsenal in terms of goals scored, goals against, best goal difference in the league, etc.
Yeah, best goal difference in the league. I think they're taking fewer shots than last season, but compared to others in the league, still rank in the top 4. Their XG is pretty good, better than Liverpool's. We're looking at Arsenal with a bit of a skewed lens at the moment because they had a really tough start to the season. I think it was the 3rd or 4th toughest start. Have already played their 2 title rivals in Man City and Liverpool. And so we've got this very small sample size, and we're trying to draw conclusions about how Arsenal season is going to go based on that. But I mean, the title of this video is, can Arteta win, finally win Arsenal the title? And, I can see why fans are concerned, because Liverpool have gone off like a rocket, despite not playing to their best ability. A little bit like last season, actually, had a really strong start, and that set the kind of standard for the season, and they were able to be quite comfortable after that and get used to Arne Slot's playing style and grow into themselves. And they've done the same this season, despite having a lot of the same teething problems that Arsenal have had. They've got a very new forward line. They've had some defensive issues. Actually, Arsenal, you can say, haven't had those defensive issues. So I see why Arsenal fans maybe feel a little shortchanged, because what you actually see in terms of overall performances on the pitch, I think, is arguably the best team in the league right now. But then you look at the table and you're 5 points off Liverpool already, and obviously that's going to pile on pressure. Last season the narrative was really strong around Arteta, as in 3rd season just missing out on a title. Obviously a bit of a regression last season in terms of goals scored, points won. So this was the season that he has to win something. But I've always kind of seen it as well, if he doesn't win something this season, what does happen then? I don't think there's necessarily a manager out there who's, ready-made to just take over this squad that, Arteta built in his image and just be able to just take them to the next level. I don't see that personally. I still think, this is Arteta's project long-term, especially given the resources, that have been handed to. But I guess that's another question, Clive. Do you feel like this is now Arteta's complete squad, given how much investment there was front to back in the team? Do you feel like, in some senses there is a bit more pressure on him now?
I think we are the kings of the depth charts, right? When you lay them out, we've got everything covered. And I do think I wish certain players were fit to allow, for example, if Havertz was available, I think Gyokeres is integrated in a slightly different way, and he's able to come on and do what Martinelli's doing right now, come on late, show his pace and power, which has always looked better when against tired defences, and do his work. But we're having to do this and integrate 6 or 7 players at the same time, but not only integrate them, but play them. because they're exposed to play. But I think these are first world problems. Honestly, I'd much rather have that problem than turning around in your bench and having to put on, for example, Kieran Tierney at left wing in a Champions League quarter-final against Real Madrid. That's not where you want to be, right? So I'm pleased with what we're doing. I'm pleased with how we've approached the season. But that has also highlighted the fact that when you have these tools, are you using them appropriately? And you are open to question, and your game approach is open to question. I think you guys can easily nullify the negatives things. When you have a game against Manchester City, you have 39 touches in the box. That alone tells you that you weren't negative. Then you can say, well, were you negative at the start? Well, what you're really saying is, there's a couple of selections I didn't like. And the way the game transpired, and it became an off-the-ball game, suddenly you're looking at ingenuity on the ball. And did we have quite enough of those players? We obviously didn't. So what do? We make changes at half-time. So you're open to that criticism, and you have to wear it. You have to wear it because last time I looked, City and Liverpool have got the League Championship in their cupboards, right? We haven't had it for a long time. So until you win, you can't set the narrative, and you have to accept the criticism. Though I do feel some of it in the mid to late September is a little bit hysterical, when there's about 55 games to go. And I'm glad if there are lessons to learn, we are learning them right now. And as we get more players back, I think these questions will disappear.
How would you review the start made by a lot of your new signings? Because Gyokeres has not really come in for criticism, let's say, but people have been questioning whether he's getting enough service in these bigger games. I think Madueke, despite not contributing a goal or an assist for Arsenal, looked incredibly bright at the start of the season. I think Zubimendi's had some brilliant games as well, was maybe not quite at his best against Man City either. And then we haven't really seen the depth options so much. But those are three players that have made a pretty sizable impact at the start of this season. How do you reflect on their start, and maybe start with Gyokeres?
Yeah, Gyokeres is an interesting one. I think, obviously, he wasn't fit to start the season, but he had to play, right? So, and I looked at him, I thought, I've seen the home games where he's looked fine, but I have to rewire my brain because we normally have midfielders or false nines playing up front, so quite high-touch players that are part of the collective pattern of play, and I've grown used to that. And now we have this guy up front just waiting, pinning two centre-backs, waiting for a chance, having 12 touches a game, whatever it is. And it's different, right? So how do you judge him? Well, you judge him on shots. Well, in the big three games, he hasn't really had shots,
But in
the two home games against Forest and against Leeds, you can see his dynamism, right? So maybe you look at it and think, okay, how's he doing? I'm not sure. Has he got goals? Yes, he has. So I still think the jury's out there. I'd like to see him get a bit fitter, but also like to see him be rotated because I think that freshness is required. I felt in the last game, although he worked really, really hard against Forest, against City, I felt he was just fading towards the end, and he wasn't really moving in the same way.
Could you see Havertz being brought, once he's back from injury, could you see Havertz actually starting those bigger games? Just because Arteta's used to that a little bit more, like if Gyokeres isn't getting the service that he wants in those games.
So our manager, he manages risk in his own style, shall we say. And what do you think? Do you think he would have Havertz, who knows all of the plans, knows what to do when we need to go long, and what to do when to drop into midfield, and can still run the channels? He's going to take that option, and he's going to use Gyokeres appropriately towards the end of the game. He's already spoken about the concept of finishers, to some people, just substitutes. But having that offensive power to power up, I think it's a real weapon.
Yeah.
I think we even used it at Old Trafford. We used it defensively to see out that game. And I think we've used 5 subs in the first 2 games. And I think it's about time football has woken up to the fact that you can change half of your outfield players. What are you going to do with them? But what you can't do, in my humble opinion, is overthink that too much, because maybe in the City game, we looked at certain options and said, okay, how about we look at this game and see what they do tactically? And then we've got people on the bench to change the game and impact it later on. But what happens when you walk into the game and Haaland smacks you in the face on minute 9, game plan changes and your team looks not like the right team. So that's the challenge that we have.
I think it's almost a little bit silly so early on to delve too far into the stats, but there are some interesting numbers around the start of the season as well. Obviously, everyone's played a different standard of fixture. Arsenal's have been commonly accepted as some of the hardest in the league, as Mikey already pointed out. Man United away, that's a notoriously difficult game for Arsenal. You're also throwing in City and Liverpool in there. I would say Liverpool also playing Arsenal, of course, Newcastle, Bournemouth, the Merseyside derby. Theirs haven't been straightforward either. But it's interesting that everyone's numbers in terms of an attacking sense seem quite down at the moment. So Arsenal's XG per game has gone from 1.9 to 1.6. And on the base level of that, you'd be like, that's quite concerning given the midfield and attacking reinforcements made. But there's only Man United that are above 1.6 XG per game so far this season. And we've seen how poor they've been in so many fixtures as well. So it does feel like so many new faces at so many of the top teams, particularly in the starting 11s. We talked about this in the summer during the transfer shows as well. So much change at all the three title contenders and kind of at Chelsea, Man United, Spurs, etc. All the biggest sides made so many changes, and it will take a while for those connections to be made, that rhythm to be found with players. Because it's not just as simple as, Zubimendi's one of the best sixes in the world. The midfield just instantly works perfectly around him, or Mikel Merino playing a kind of unfamiliar role and expected to play as that right-sided 8, and he hasn't necessarily played that much of there for Arsenal so far. So it will take a while for those connections to build. There is just the element of what is needed to win a title in the sort of Pep era, and I count the Pep era as 2017-18 onwards, when that Centurion season happened. And generally, what you've needed in terms of an average in the last 5 seasons, so actually since 2020, 2021, so in the last 5 seasons, which is a little bit fairer because those crazy Pep and Klopp days, we're not really going to see that again, the 100, 98, 99 point seasons. I just don't think that's realistic. But in the last 5 seasons, the average goals scored by a title winner is 92, goals conceded is 33, and wins is 27. Now, Arsenal have never scored more than 91 goals under Arteta, but they've only conceded fewer than 33 once as well. So it has felt like, yes, they've been in contention the last few seasons, but have they ever actually on paper looked like title winners in terms of the raw numbers? Not really. And yes, if you swap some seasons out where they finish with close to 90 points, and then Liverpool's campaign last year ends up on 84, I believe it was, sure, it can work out. But it's just about whether they can get in both ranges. And I think last year, the attack really suffered, but the defence was still really solid. But the defence actually had been more solid in previous years as well. So it's about making sure you're in both areas. And it does feel like Arsenal have all the defensive tools compared to a lot of their title rivals. Yeah. Even looking last night in the Carabao Cup, Leone getting injured. We don't know how serious that is as we film this, but that's Liverpool's third choice centre-back or fourth choice centre-back gone. Gomez and Konate have massive injury issues, or a past of injury issues as well. Van Dijk now deep into his 30s. So we'll see how injuries kind of affect it going forward. But Clive, do you have, at least in a defensive sense, because people will criticise Arteta for being defensive, even though I don't think that's necessarily the case, do you have a lot of belief in your back four and the sort of back 8 now in terms of depth as well?
Yeah, we've got a great defensive unit, and we've got 2 good goalkeepers as well now. Kepa was Bournemouth's keeper last season, and so he's used to the league, and his play style is similar to Raya, so we don't have to kick it long per se. We can still have the +1 at the back because he can play, and so the defensive unit is in place. I think offensively and in midfield, I think we're okay. We're okay, but we've yet to see the main man in Bukayo Saka. Right, so he is the guy that makes the difference. He's the guy that we look to, and he understands what we're trying to do. I think Kai Havertz is very important for us tactically to be able to provide solutions on the pitch rather than make substitutions and change. And Odegaard has been a miss as well, right? So if I said to you we're going to not have those 3 players for any significant period of time, that's basically our team there offensively. So we're still to be discovered. If there are Liverpool people listening to this right now, it's the same for them. McAllister came back from the summer, not quite fit. Konate wasn't fit at the start of the season. He's sharpening up now. They're integrating 2 fullbacks. It's tough for them to do that as well. Okay, I'm not going to cry too much about the money they spent up front, but they still got to integrate them into the team. And I think it's the same for everybody. Hence why I don't think it's just Arteta being cautious. I think all 3 of them are being cautious. In the Liverpool game, I've never seen anything like that from a Liverpool team. They looked at each other, and then eventually they woke up, got the goal, and held on. City, the same thing. They sat in, they jumped on us, got the goal. They looked at, okay, we're getting played through here. We need to drop away. They're cautious because it's early in the season. you can't win it in September, but you might lose it by doing dumb stuff. And I think that's how they view it, right? So they know they're not ready yet. They're trying to build their squads, build their teams, even though on paper we've got it all, but it's not ready yet. You know, and I say the same for the other teams as well.
I think that's where Arsenal should, in theory, have a slight advantage, though, is that, you know, the spine of that team, okay, aside from Zubimendi, I guess Gyokeres as well, but, you know, there's enough players back to front in that team who have been there for at least a couple of years and know Arteta's system, whereas at City and Liverpool, feels like there's been sections of the team which have had whole far kind of changes, whether that be at full-back for Liverpool and up front. City, you know, the post KDB, that midfield is never going to be the same. Reinders already looks like he's, you know, changed the entire vibe of that midfield. So I do feel like Arsenal should, in theory, have a bit of an advantage there in terms of having, you know, the likes of Rice and Odegaard with Zubimendi to be able to bed him in.
But is that advantage taken away when Odegaard and Saka missed the start of the season?
To an extent, but then I think the other telling thing is that, you know, Arsenal did, injured now, but Madueke started really well, I think, because, you know, he's got tons of Premier League experience now. Eze, I think, has looked electric whenever he's played. Again, you know, tons of Premier League experience, tons of experience playing against Arsenal as well. So I think, you know, those two, they feel like they've had seamless transitions in that sense, and really look like money well spent at the moment, and add so much depth there. And I think in the coming weeks, we will see Eze get way, way more minutes. And I think this is where, kind of going back to my previous point, I think we're going to be able to judge Arsenal a lot better, especially after this weekend. Of course, like Newcastle away is a difficult one, but that brings an end to a tough start to the season. And then I think Arsenal don't play a team that finished in the top half last season until November. I think their next 6 so their next 6 games. And that's where you expect Gyokeres to really come on fire, because he was brilliant against Forest and brilliant against Leeds. And if Arsenal want to win the league, they need to beat the lesser teams, right? Like in previous years, it's been, you know, games against Bournemouth, games against Villa, which have seen Arsenal come unstuck. Yeah, like there's a lot of chat about, you know, there's a lot of chat about, you know, the Man City result or the Liverpool result. But generally speaking, Arsenal have been pretty good against their rivals in recent years. Was it almost 3 years, mate, there or thereabouts, that you guys were unbeaten against other top 6 sides, or other big 6 sides, I should say. But that didn't ultimately lead to Arsenal winning a league. It was coming unstuck against the smaller sides, and the way that just having Gyokeres as the focal point, I thought it was particularly with his goal, you know, the way he took it against Forest. It's like in previous years, would Havertz actually be in that position at that moment in time? We saw so many, you know, balls across the box from Bukayo Saka over the years where there wasn't quite that guy on the end of it. And Gyokeres is there to be that guy. So I do feel like, the solution to any kind of teething problems might be seen in the next 6 weeks. I think if Gyokeres gets, you know, I don't know, like 4, 5, 6 goals in that time, then we might be looking at Arsenal in 6 weeks' time and being like, actually, maybe these guys are actually the favourites. You know, maybe Liverpool drop a point here or there in that time too.
Absolutely. I mean, another sort of narrative in the sort of forward line is something that we discussed a lot in the summer, was the pressure kind of on Gabriel Martinelli. Hadn't had a brilliant last couple of seasons, but his impact off the bench against Athletic Bilbao and now against Man City, that's a real positive, because late in games, Clive, you imagine with that pace and that fearlessness in terms of driving off the last man as well, that could make a huge difference. Huge difference.
And he's looked so bright. And I did worry about him. I've critiqued him. I worried. I was wondering if his ability to carry and make quick, direct decisions was really working for him. Madueke's come in, and funny enough, he's done a good impression of Martinelli, who's running in behind. And when he gets the ball to feet, he just goes. He doesn't think. And I think that's almost woke Martinelli up and said, I need to do that. And in Bilbao, got the ball to his feet, just went, set up a second goal, and his goal was excellent there as well. So I'm pleased we found him back, but of course we've lost Madueke now. I think beyond the headlines and narratives that are being set, there are some useful things that we're doing. We're doing some really nice rotations on left-hand side between Calafiori, Rice, Eze, Trossard, whoever's there. And it's really quite nice to see Calafiori come into the team and doing what he's doing. The double pivot introduction with Zubimendi and Rice taking turns when to drop in on the seesaw, dropping in. I sometimes feel maybe we got too many people behind the ball, not enough between the lines. But again, when Eze comes in, we fix that. And if Odegaard's there, we fix that. So I'm seeing some interesting things. I'm seeing switches to wide men quicker, so they got more space, not so many 3-on-1s. And we've got a centre forward that holds people. Now, you might not touch the ball, but you can't leave him. You know, you can't miss him. He's like a wardrobe for starters, and he can run. And so it's creating a new dynamic, you know, and it's different. And I think I'm learning it. We're not there yet. It's not complete, but I think I'm learning it. And I think we're learning about each other as fans. But what's happening is there's a perception gap developing. When you have perceived strengths, you need to deploy them, right? So that's the perception. And if you don't deploy them, you're seen as negative. Whereas the numbers are saying we're not negative, we could need to be a bit more ingenuity maybe at certain stages. But we have those players. They're just not here for different reasons. So it'll change very, very quickly, I hope.
And one player that I think almost kind of by accident who's taking a bit of flack at the moment, or when we talked about selections, people going, oh, why is he starting, is Mikel Merino, which feels a little bit harsh given his impact, particularly in the latter half of last season, playing out of position as a centre-forward, a position he'd never played before. He was brilliant. I mean, for long stretches, Arsenal, you know, he kept you in the Champions League for various parts as well. Is it a little bit unfair that he's now becoming almost, not a scapegoat, that feels a bit dramatic, but definitely taking some flack because he's starting over Eze? Because this is a very useful player and you don't want him to become, you know, lose some confidence.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, again, selection discussion. If Eze would have played this game, I think he would have played on the left. We went for Trossard, and I think that was a view to ending the game strong. That's my opinion anyway. Now, people see Eze as a 10, played for Crystal Palace. Well, he played left 10, didn't he, really, in a double 10 system. And he didn't play on the right side of the pitch. Again, knowing our manager, he's going to put someone there who knows who can do that job, you know, particularly off the ball. If you ask Crystal Palace fans about Eze, his off the ball pressing is not his strength. So the way we use our right-sided 10 is in a 4-4-2 press, and that person leads it, and it's got to be tactically intelligent. So I think Eze off the left for Arsenal works really well. In this game, he came on in the 10, tick. We've now learned he can do it in this game state, and he did really, really well. And so I still think we're developing, we're learning about each other, and isn't that normal? Isn't that normal? Trust me, I can pick the best team after the game, you know. But I will say, as that team sheet came out before the game, and everyone's in the pub getting ready and getting excited, I did sort of feel that Eze should have been in that team. You know, that was my gut feeling. I didn't care where. I just wanted another baller on the pitch. That was my thought process, and it became apparent we needed him, regardless, because the game told us we needed him. But yeah, I'm pleased that we have now got the ability to react. Now we've got to work out who we are when our key offensive pillars are back. And maybe don't think about what the opposition can do. Think about what you can do. You know, and I think that's maybe the message. And I think, because in football, there's a psychological message that gets sent to your own players and to the opposition. And we've got the opportunity now, when all these offensive tools are here, to say, this is who we are, this is how we're going to play, can you stop us? And that moment's coming real quick.
Do you feel like Arteta will do that? Because, yeah, it does feel like already at the start of this season, a lot's been made about the style of football that we're seeing in the Premier League, almost a bit of a reversion to what we were seeing 20 years ago. Do you feel like, yeah, like individual quality over expansive game plans and, you know, minute by minute tactics? Do you feel like that could, you know, Arteta could revert to that a little bit to win these big games?
I think
or to win games in general.
I think the influence of Liverpool's play last season, they're quite direct play, particularly in transition. Their behaviours on the turnover, just rapid. They just turn around and go. And then they push it forward and they counter press from there. I think that's had an impact to how Arsenal view our own team, because we and City are quite slow in build-up. You know, we get into attacking shape to make sure we can counter, and then we can hold people into certain territories. But what you're developing then is game after game of low block games, because you're just too good and you push people back. So now we're dropping in, we're putting people on a little bit more, double pivoting, trying to get people in, and then we go over, and then we get into 4-on-4, 1-on-1s, and let's go from there. So the pitch looks bigger from my seat because it's a bit more transitional. But again, it's new. it's new. And I think City are doing something similar. They're lengthening the pitch. So we're going for a different trend, aren't we? So why I get a little bit frustrated about all the debate this weekend was that, did anyone know that game was going to go like that? Because I didn't. Because I've never seen a Pep Guardiola team have that low possession in my life. Yeah. And so if you knew, you're better than me, and that's it. But we've got ability to react. That's always key.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that was. I mean, it's been really telling with City in general the last few weeks. I mean, the fact the game in which they beat Man United 3-0 had 45% possession is mad. And yes, a lot of that ball dominance from Man United came after they went 3-0 down. But in seasons past, we've seen City go 3-0 up against Man United and then start licking their lips and saying, you know, how many can we get here? How much more can we smother this team? And yeah, they've, you know, have changed, you know, completely in that sense. So it is really interesting to see. And like you say, you know, I don't know, maybe Arteta could have seen that game and been like, you know what, maybe City might try something different, try something similar with us. That's maybe one criticism I could level at him, is not having that foresight.
I think, this is what I think, right? I've got loads of thoughts. This is what I think.
Keep them coming.
City played in Napoli on the Thursday night. And if you're the coach, right, you're thinking, you know what? They're going to get tired. They're going to drop away. I'm going to have a look at them, see what they've got. But I'm going to load up late in the game when they drop off, right? So, and it worked, but they'd already scored by then. and that's what happens. You make your bed. That's your game plan, and that's what. And then now you get criticised for not being for wasting the first 45 minutes, right? So, in that game, when you do a rewatch, the first 9 minutes, so we were great. We give the ball away. Don't get around Haaland, and I'm afraid he turned a 2-on-2 into a 3-on-2 in 10 seconds. Right?
And I guess that, you know, there were multiple openings in that first half as well, where, you know, if Gyokeres had just been a little bit sharper, if Madueke had found his man, you know, Arsenal do probably score, don't they? I mean, this is an Arsenal team, you know, that with, I think it was it Trossard, Havertz and Martinelli in the forward line, beat Man City 5-1 last season. So yeah, like all it takes is a couple of things to go right in that first half, and Arsenal are in the driving seat. But yeah, I think I do feel like Arteta will be thinking about that game for a while.
It's definitely notable how I think City, there's been changes behind the scenes in their coaching setup, and I think there's been a real change in their recruitment in the last few years to players in transition. Doku, Marmoush is a transitional player. Reinders as well, players like Kovacic as well, whose best trait is driving through midfield as well. They're going for a very different style of play to what Pep was known for, and it's fascinating to watch. I just feel almost, some people watching this, particularly because I'm not an Arsenal fan, will be kind of like, what's he on about? Why do you feel sorry for Arteta? Especially because he's been back to such a massive degree, and he has been. Like, only Man United have a higher net spend in the last 5 years than Arsenal, which is crazy given how much Chelsea have spent in that time, but they've managed to recoup so much through player sales. But I can't remember, maybe back to kind of Klopp before he'd won that Champions League, where a season or a manager is so, the narrative is already decided. He's either a kind of failure in the wider, if he doesn't land a big trophy, or he's kind of completed almost the perfect job if he lands one of the big trophies or a trophy at all. You know, where Arsenal were to build them slowly, inch by inch. And yes, last season was a drop-off for a number of reasons. I think slightly lost their way in an attacking sense. There was injuries, there was red cards. It wasn't far from an ideal season whatsoever. But it just feels like the narrative is on a knife edge with Arteta this season, and it does feel almost quite brutal on him, because I think so much of his good work will kind of be forgotten about if they don't land. And I think, you know, a Carabao Cup would come into it for sure, but if they don't land one of the big trophies during his tenure, he's almost put down as a what-if manager, which feels unfair given the quality of his work, Clive. I mean, is that your feeling in the Arsenal community, that so many people are almost waiting to jump on him? There
is a lot of that, and I do think the job he's done has been great. However, there comes a point in time when you have to arrive at your destination, right? So in a continuous improvement environment, you're always looking for the next thing, but at some point you do need to win. Right? To remind people, this is what it's like, this is what we're all about. And by the way, I've got your careers in my hands, and I want you to have a medal. And those players, that they really want it. I think you can always tell with players what they think about their manager by the work rate and the effort. And you can see the off-the-ball focus. I watched the Forest game, had a good seat, and I was watching it, and the off-the-ball focus was massive. Absolutely massive from everybody, right? I'm going to revert to City right now. City's kilometres covered at the weekend was huge. They are behind their manager. They're behind what they're trying to do. Forget what you think as a fan. Are the players responding to the request of the coach? They absolutely are. They made 1 million clearances from that box. This is not them. And they stopped us from getting a good day, right? So I think there's a lot of pressure on the manager. And I don't think it's fair. But I also feel this is a big boy environment. And we've invested a lot of money. And I think it's okay up to a point. What I will say is some of the reactions to a 1-1 draw at home to Manchester City, who, by the way, last time I looked, have won us 3 trophies in the last few years, I think is a little bit hysterical. And I think I can say this now a few days afterwards because people do calm down over time. And I think the Liverpool umbrella of perfection has just drove an extra bit of pressure around us. If Liverpool dropped some points, we'd be all right. We'd be all right. But Liverpool are quite a good club as well, you know. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Do you think as well that adds pressure to Arteta in that Arne Slot came in first season, had to take over from, you know, one of the best managers we've seen in the Premier League, and just did it first time with, almost a perfect season. Do you feel like that's also adds pressure?
This is one bit I envy Liverpool, right? There's a level of serenity around their environment. When you win, it's okay, right? So, and there's a level of calm, and there isn't that same calm at Arsenal. And I don't know how the players and management deal with it. You know, honestly, I just think it's...
So you think it's fan-led?
I think it's everything-led. You know, I think there are eyes, it's fan, it's media up to a point. I think the only people that can maybe think, I'm going to say this, but Manchester United lost to Man City, and they lost. And City did okay in the game, but all the conversations about Manchester United. You know, I think some of it's fair and some of it may be unfair, right? And I think it's similar with Arsenal. We lost Liverpool. I thought it was a really good goal. You know, we did well in the game, didn't quite do enough. Could we have been a bit more aggressive, a bit more offensive? Well, not many teams rock up to Anfield and do that, right? So, and not many people hold Liverpool to an XG in that game like we did. It doesn't matter, we didn't win. So you can't say anything. You've got to win. Against Man City, we didn't win. The more dominant team, were we dangerous enough? Not sure, but our intentions eventually were the right ones, and we got an equaliser. In the end, you can't cry about it. You got to say, you know what? We want to win more than what everyone's saying, and we have to accept this. We got to accept it, and we've got to push on, and we've got to try to keep some serenity to make good decisions, pick the players we want to pick against the game plan we want to do. And if that doesn't work, you make changes and adjust.
Is there a point in the season where you would start to get worried if, say, Arsenal fell, I don't know, another 3 points behind Liverpool? There was an 8-point gap.
Which,
given
you're playing Newcastle this weekend,
maybe
could happen.
Is there a point in the season, if there is a gap like that, say, I don't know, November, December, I don't know if it's later in January or February, where you would start to worry about Arsenal's title credentials and the feeling around the club and Arteta?
The 2 or 3 things that worry me: health, injuries, they worry me because you can't get rhythm. When Saka's back now, but he's not back yet. It's going to take a couple of weeks for him to be really back, right? So that type of thing concerns me. I also think away from home, we haven't really sparkled yet, and we need to. I've seen 2 really good home games where we were really, really good, and even the City game was good in patches. There were some dead patches there as well where they looked after us and they overcame us tactically. So away from home, United wasn't sparkling. Liverpool wasn't sparkling. Bilbao was business-like, but it wasn't sparkling. I want to see us flow away from home. You know, that's what I'm looking for. So that does worry me a little bit. And also, eventually, what will happen over time will be the dressing room dynamics. Because when we do have everybody fit, there's going to be a couple of people in overcoats on the sideline, not even in tracksuits. And so that's going to cause a potential problem, right? So it's all about keeping it all together. Hence why I envy Liverpool's serenity around their environment. Even though they have huge gaps, they have issues potentially around the corner. It doesn't matter, right? So I envy that serenity. So we're not going to get serenity around Arsenal. I've accepted it, right? So no matter how calming my voice is, I've accepted that Arsenal's going to be a place where it's all the discussion's going to be about winning.
It's a good point you raised there, though, in terms of the comparisons, because Liverpool last season, Arne Slot was able to come into okay, having to take over from Klopp, but a completely settled team. Didn't end up getting Zubimendi in the summer, but that was their only major target. So they had a very, a settled squad who knew each other inside out and knew how to play for each other, had all those connections, wired into their brains.
Yeah.
Whereas Arteta, well, he's added to his squad season on season. They are pretty settled now, but like you say, that it's a big squad there now, and now they're being expected to, because on paper they have such great depth. This is their season, but yeah, you've got to, I don't know, improve on last season, inspire a winning mentality, and also integrate 9 new players into the squad.
8 or 9.
It is a lot. It is a lot for him to deal with.
One more thing on that. I think the difference in approach. Liverpool have gone for the star approach, right? They've gone for the 100 million players. And we've gone for the depth approach, and I think that, we'll see what happens with that, right? Because Europe's now in the play, the League Cup's in play, going to play with 3 days. There are 9 teams in the Premier League that are in Europe this season. I'm not sure all 9 teams have the depth to cope with that. And so I'm hoping the season comes to us. But it won't come to us if our depth is all injured as well, right? So that is the worry. And so we just have to wait and see.
Mikey, in terms of, we've spoken a lot about the pressure Arteta's under, but I think the player arguably under the most pressure this season is probably Martin Odegaard, because of how difficult last season was compared to his previous couple. Do you think there could be a narrative that if he doesn't get back to his best soon, people will be calling for Eze to permanently play in that position, or maybe even in Ethan Nwaneri, or that he needs to, I've even seen people talk about displacing him as captain. Do you think that he does feel like this is kind of a make or break season for him?
I think it is a bit. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, Clive, because you've watched him over the years, probably tons more than I have. But yeah, I think, when the Eze links first transpired earlier in the summer, the reports seemed to suggest that Arsenal were looking at him as more of a 10 option when they were still, looking for players on the left wing as well. So I think, I think Eze's presence there does put more pressure on him, and I'm sure Arteta's hoping that, Odegaard is inspired by that pressure. But yeah, I do think the narrative around him, both from rival fans and from Arsenal fans, at least online, was, that, I felt quite sorry for Odegaard at points last season, given the contribution that he's given to Arsenal in the seasons up to that point. And yes, I certainly do think there's pressure on him in there. Do I think it's like make or break? I don't know. I think he's still going to be an Arsenal player this time next year. But it's another dilemma for Arteta to deal with. Generally speaking, you need to play your, play your captain. And we've seen a similar thing at Man United this season in terms of, Bruno being played out of his best position, and then Kobbie Mainoo, Ruben Amorim kind of, I think, naively saying that Kobbie Mainoo, that's the player that he needs to replace if he wants to get into the starting lineup. And so it kind of builds this narrative amongst the fans of, do we play our star boy or do we play our captain and best player? It's just so unuseful. So I do feel like, at least with Arsenal, it's like you've got Eze who can play at multiple positions. Odegaard also, actually, in games against smaller sides, is capable of playing a more advanced 8 role. I think they can play in the same team together, even in a midfield 3 or in a double pivot behind Eze. And Eze can also play there as well. I think that's the advantage that Arsenal have now, is that, like Rice was rested against Nottingham Forest, and it was great because they could bring him on late in the game. I don't think there is exactly the same problem, and you'd hope that, given Odegaard's role in the dressing room ever since he arrived at the club, let alone since he's been captain, and his relationship with Arteta, that, any kind of pressure, any, potential bad feeling around him could be managed from within fairly well. But I don't know what your feeling is. Do you feel like, from your perspective as an Arsenal fan, like, do you expect Odegaard to be giving a lot more this term?
Yeah, I think there's a discussion developing around the number 10, right? So I'm not a number 10 fan. I like number 8s, right? But forget my personal biases. So the number 10, that connector that connects things and gets things forward. Odegaard's done it for years. Now we've got the Eze option. We've got the Nwaneri option. Sorry. But we seem to have landed on Mikel Merino, right? So and so this is where I didn't answer your question earlier, Dougie, properly. I think Arteta sees Merino differently to what we do. I think that's clear. I think he sees that position as something far more intelligence-based rather than technically based, right? So, but I want to see Odegaard back. But I want to see him back to what he used to be. I think he had a tough year last year. He lost a bit of strength later in the season, whether it was recovering from injury. And I felt he'd noted the feedback because pre-season and during the start of this season when he was on the pitch, he started to look more punchy, more dynamic, trying to get the ball forward, be more direct in his thought processes, and not have so many touches. I thought, he's on Twitter, mate. He's read stuff, right? So, and so he's tried, but we need him back to being that player because he does recognise what a game offers. Some people are tiring of him. That's fine. That happens in football. But me personally, I want him back because I think he reads the tactical side of the game, knows where to be. I think he started off a bit more central. I think there's critique of us that we don't hold that central bit between the lines. I accept it up to a point because our creation numbers are not where they should be. So you have to accept it, So and so we are, but we now have the tools to with Eze and Odegaard and Saka. I do not think we're going to be talking about creativity for much longer if those three players are on the pitch.
Yeah, it's got to be back to levels we've seen before. I also always wonder with Odegaard, I feel like when Arsenal were at their absolute best going forward a couple of seasons ago, the white Odegaard Saka triumvirate on the right hand side, and yes, you were way too lopsided and it was all going down the right, and now it feels a lot more balanced. But it did feel like White really brought out the best in Odegaard as well. I think White was a really underrated right back, and I think Timber's brilliant. I think Timber's a great all-round footballer. I think he's arguably maybe an even better defender than White, which is saying something because I really rate Ben White as well. But I wonder whether on the ball Timber's as brave as Ben White and as committed going forward. Do you think that could be a factor as well, Clive, or do you see it differently, that right back slot?
Yeah, game for your life, burnabout. You want Timber as your right back because he's going to lock down whoever you've got. It doesn't really matter, really. European game, second leg, that's who you want there. Against teams when you want to progress and teams have decided they're not going to play us, you need much more chaos around that position and strong, long runs. And Ben White has that, right? He's got a nice cross on him. And I think he creates space for Saka. And we've seen that for a couple of years. Again, he struggled with injury. He missed 4 or 5 months last year. He's already out this year. So again, what you're seeing offensively is not complete. Mm-hmm. Timber at the moment, back off an operation, not quite as his sharpest to last the whole game. You can see late in games he's quite fatigued. If we had the ability to have White there or vice versa, share the role. So I do think, although this is a powerful squad, it's a powerful engine, it's not fully there yet. And I will stand by that. But then the focus is on making sure the things you do have, you do use them. Right? And that's the difference. And so I think that's where the hysteria comes from. But I will say, Sunday's coming up, Newcastle.
Does that worry you? Because that's a ground that you've had some difficult games.
It does worry me. I personally think Newcastle and Anfield are the toughest places to go. For this Arsenal team, Newcastle fans love Arsenal. And so it should be a nice, quiet environment. and so, yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough game. When we did win there, we won there technically, funny enough, rather than going into a arm wrestle with them. And so, but what Newcastle are quite good at is getting that first goal. And then they are very good shape-wise. Eddie Howe's got them well structured. And I think we need to get that first goal. I think the game opens up against them. And I think we need to play football, not play muscle ball, play football with them and make sure that we impose our technical ability on them. I think that's the way I would approach this game on the weekend.
How would you line up the midfield and the attack then with the options that you currently have? Well,
if I can get them off the hospital bed, I think I would have Saka, Odegaard and Eze in that team for that game. If it's Gyokeres at centre forward, that's fine. Yeah. I tell you now, I'm not against Merino at centre forward. And the reason why, it's about control. When you go away, you have to control. But you can't do that at the moment because you've got a centre forward there, you've got to use him. And I think I would go that way. I would go with that 4.
With Merino as the
I'm 50-50 on that. Okay. I'm not overly worried. I just want to make sure. I don't mind Merino as an 8. I don't mind him as a 9. I'm just not so sure he suits the 10, you know, and that's where I am. And so when he plays the 9, he does a good job for us as a target man. So long as you've got people running around him, it's fine. And when he plays the 8 against Forest, I thought he was excellent in that game, you know. So yeah, I want to see the 3 creators behind a forward. That's what I'm really after.
Mikey, question to you, and I'll ask the same to Clive in just a second. I think before a ball was kicked, we both backed Liverpool for the league title.
I backed Arsenal.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's the same question.
Yeah.
Has anything that's happened in the first 5 games of the season changed your mind on that, or are you still backing Arsenal?
I think I'm still just about backing Arsenal. I guess, yeah, aside from injuries, as Clive's alluding to, I still think Arsenal have the best depth up and down the pitch, quite significantly on Man City and Liverpool. And yeah, I think Liverpool's start to the season, I don't think it's necessarily taken me by surprise because they've got so many, they've got so many winners in that team. Yeah, I wasn't expecting Arsenal to be 5 points behind at this point. But having said that, Arsenal have had a tougher time of it than Liverpool. They don't play another title rival again until I think it's the 3rd of January when they host Liverpool. My mind could be changed in the next 6 weeks. I think after 10 games, the Premier League table tends to look fairly similar to what it does at the end of the season. So I think, yeah, in 6 weeks, I'll have a better idea. But yeah, for now, I'm still backing Arsenal. I think, they've looked very promising, first of all. I think they've looked incredibly solid in almost every game. And they've also shown that there is clear room for improvement in certain elements, especially of their attacking play. And so, if they can improve on that, then I do think they become the favourites for the league, or at least they become the best functioning team in the league. I think you obviously can say the same for Liverpool, but I think there's more new blood to bed in there in many ways. And also with Liverpool, you have the thing of, if one midfielder gets injured, if one defender gets injured from that starting lineup, then there is a much bigger downgrade waiting to come on. Whereas with Arsenal, as we've seen so far, a number of major injuries, which this time last year had already almost derailed their title charge. This year, we're talking about like who should play in the 10 out of like 4 players. So it's like, it couldn't be any more different to what it was like 12 months ago for Arsenal. So yeah, I'm still backing them.
We haven't even touched on him, but Mosquera as well has been absolutely brilliant when he stepped in for Saliba as well. I mean, Clive, we talked about it on one of the transfer shows in the summer. You and James Allcott were both backing Arsenal at the time. Are you still confident?
I am. The things that concern me is offensive ambition. Yeah, I think we got to show more ambition. It's not even about the selections always, but if your ambition is where it should be, your selections will take care of themselves. And I think it's hard in the bigger games because I think everyone is looking at each other. But from here on in now, I think the need is greater to show who you really are. And I felt that before the City game, and I feel it even now more so before the Newcastle game. There is a run afterwards, but I always worry because Liverpool are really good front runners. They're comfortable when they're in the lead. The size of their badge gets bigger. Their crowd gets behind them, and they're comfortable there, And so you can't let them get too far away. I think when they're under pressure, they're like anybody else. They can crumble. If there's no pressure, they can handle it really, really well. So yeah, if we show them more offensive ambition, get some players healthy, and start to up our away performances, I'll feel a lot more confident.
Fair enough. Yeah, you make a good point about them being front runners because was it 27 games unbeaten in that COVID season last year as well? Huge gap. That's why I've got so much interest in this weekend. Them at Palace, you guys at St James's Park. Just absolutely massive weekend for it because 8 points, if it was to go that way, feels absolutely huge. I was backing Liverpool before a ball was kicked, and I'm just about still backing them now. Although Hugo Ekitike not being available for this weekend is a bit of a shame after that second yellow card for taking his shirt off after a tapping against Southampton. Not surprised that Arne was fuming about that. That has been the Lowdown for another week, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you very much to Mikey McCubbin as ever. And thank you to Clive Palmer. Clive, if people have loved watching you on this show, which they no doubt have, because I've definitely loved listening to you, where can they find you?
Well, I can find me mostly on the Arsenal Vision podcast, where they let me say exactly what I like. And the audience seems to like it, so that's where I am. Yeah.
Oh, love it. Go check out that podcast. It's a brilliant listen. Thanks so much for listening and watching this, guys. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.